Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. So lovely to chat to you, Samuel. Maybe you could just kick off by telling us how you feel about your nomination for the Times Breakthrough Award.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I feel incredibly privileged and honoured, and I think that just like gets more every day. The more I realise how prestigious the award is, and really get a sense of how massive a cultural institution the South Bank show is and was. Like, I think it went off air in like 2011. So like when I told my mum that I've been nominated for it, she was like, "Oh my God, that's huge!" And I was like, "Oh, okay." I just have to go on YouTube and then look back at all of Melvin's interviews with. I mean, he's just interviewed everybody, so it was obviously just an incredible honor to be in amongst all those names. I mean, yeah, so amazing, an amazing experience to be just asked questions by somebody who knows so much about every facet of arts and everything like that. Yeah,
because the list of people who've received the awards: Stormzy, Tom Hiddleston, Jessie Buckley. So does it feel great to be amongst those names and also amongst the completely diverse range of talent nominated for this year as well?
Yeah, I think that's what is like so amazing about it is, to be on a list with like Arlo Parks and The Pin and, all of the other sort of amazing nominees. I don't think there's an award quite like it. I think, that really sort of represents the breadth of culture that we have here in the UK, really. So I think that, yeah, is obviously amazing. And to be the sort of representative from theatre, I mean, as we know, maybe not the strongest field this year with everything that's happened, but still, I'll take it. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, to be just mentioned in a conversation with sort of iconic people like Stormzy is just like, yeah, it's kind of insane, really. But yeah, mad.
And I guess, as you mentioned, theatre obviously been a especially tough year. So how does it feel as well to be kind of recognising all that's gone in the arts over this year and how people have managed to stay connected and stay involved in the industry despite kind of the most difficult of challenges, really?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, obviously, talking mainly from a theatre perspective, just watching some of the theatres just work so hard to keep going, keep putting work out there, and like the engagement teams, making sure that the communities that they're working in still feel a connection with those theatres. I mean, it feels like everything's shut down, but it hasn't. Everyone behind the scenes has been working like twice as hard to make sure that all of those places could just keep their head above water, really. So I think, yeah, hopefully the ceremony itself will just sort of feel like a real celebration of that, and we can just show everybody that we're still here, and as soon as we can, we're ready to welcome everybody back in and give everybody a bit of time off from from the sort of grind of it all. So yeah.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about the play itself, about Shook. Where did the idea for that play come from? And, why did you want to tell that particular story on the stage?
What inspired me was just sort of growing up around young men who had spent some time in young offenders institutions, really. So to give a bit of context about the play, it's about three young boys, sort of 16, 17 years of age, who are in a prison for young people called a YOY. And sort of over the course of the play, they are taking childcare lessons because they're all due to be fathers, or they've already got young children on the outside. So through the course of the play, they sort of learn how to change nappies and practical things like that, but also sort of start to learn a little bit more about their own childhoods and the impact that had on them and the choices that they made. And maybe hopefully you start to see them reevaluate some of those choices and think about their own lives, really. But yeah, so just sort of the inspiration from it was derived from some lads that I grew up with, went to school with, lived around the corner from. No names, but yeah, sort of people that I was close to for a long time. Yeah, and I just sort of felt like their stories was not something that I'd seen on stage, or certainly maybe not depicted in a way that I recognized or felt was completely representative of them. And that's not to say that necessarily this is completely representative of them. I mean, hopefully I've done a decent job, and we you know, yeah, so.
And you know, it seems like it deals with a lot of issues around kind of masculinity, about, you know, how men of a certain class are viewed by society, and kind of trying to get a bit behind that, and show that there's a lot more nuance, and you know, there's a lot of emotional stuff that goes on behind that kind of, you know, hyper masculine facade that certainly men, I guess, in prison have to put up front, never mind, you know, if in their daily lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think the setting works because it is a hyper masculine environment, you know. So those themes of masculinity are sort of easier to interrogate in some ways, because this is a place of extremity. You know, this is somewhere where, as you say, they have to put on a front, can't show vulnerability. So it's just taking that idea of masculinity and just pushing it to an extreme. But it's something that I think all men, some men are better at understanding the restrictions and the difficulties that come along with masculinity, and some aren't, you know, as we've seen with the football recently over the last few days. And I think, yeah, just trying to have a conversation about what that means, and why for some men it's so important, and why for some men it's a topic that feels uncomfortable to interrogate. And I think Shook hopefully asks some questions, or just poses some questions around that topic.
And you were mentioning there, you know, the kind of all that went on in the aftermath of the Euros. So what was your sort of reaction to all of that? Because I guess in some ways you could see that, well, it's just a minority of people, not even fans, but people looking for an excuse. But of course, it doesn't do any favors to the perception of, you know, men of a certain class, if you like. So how did you feel about all that unfolded?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's hard to watch, as you say. You know, it's a small and loud minority of football fans that are sort of grabbing the headlines, really, in that. But yeah, I think some of the examples of I mean, you know, toxic masculinity feels like a little bit of a dated phrase now, or something which doesn't, you know, quite represent the nuance with which we want to talk about that. But for want of a better phrase, you know, it just that it's hard, because on one side of me, you know, I want to sympathize, and I want to say, you know, that there's nothing wrong with blowing off a bit of steam, but there's ways to blow off steam. And I think that was a really unfortunate sort of, you know, the storming of Wembley, and you know, I mean, all of the stuff that came after for the team that had represented us was just not what anybody, you know, wants people to think of working class men or football fans in general. So, you know, I think, again, that's something that we need to have a big conversation about. And, you know, then there are certain elements of that support that need rooting out, and that need, changing, really.
And your play, you know, obviously kind of was a word of mouth sensation at Southwark Playhouse, which actually used to be just around the corner from where I lived. When I lived in Elephant and Castle. Love that theatre. But then kind of got cut short in terms, you know, didn't get its West End transfer, but has had a new life online. So how do you feel about all that? Both kind of, it obviously really connecting with audiences, but also maybe having to have a different life than you first intended.
Yeah, I mean, you know, through the digital version of the filmed version of the play, you know, we got reviewed by the New York Times, which I don't know if that never, you know, ever would have happened if we went into Traff Studios. So you got to sort of, you know, take take the good from the bad and just think like that was an incredible thing to see, you know, a review in a paper like that. So yeah, and also I think what was interesting about the film is that it made the play feel very different for me. You know, filming it without an audience meant that the funny bits weren't so funny and the poignant bits were more poignant. You know, in some ways it oddly felt more intimate because, you know, the way that James and George shot it without an audience and getting in quite close to the actors at times just sort of made it feel like a very different play, which for me as sort of the writer of it was a great experience, because you could just sort of see where you thought the play's strengths, you know, lay, that actually sometimes that in this different version they were elsewhere, and actually the more dramatic moments felt like they had more poignancy. But I think, you know, the actors did an incredible job in both versions. We were obviously very sad not to go to the West End, but I feel like Papa Tango really did it justice in the version that they did. And to be fair to them, I was quite skeptical about digital theatre when they first sort of suggested it. So sort of props to them really for having that faith in the play and that it would find a new audience. So, which it did, and I'm very happy that it did.
And what do you think we have missed, though, from being able to experience live theatre, especially in a place like Southwark Playhouse, for example, where it really is just so close to the action, you're almost in the room with the actors, you know, on the stage. So what have we missed from not having access to that kind of live performance?
Oh, so much. I mean, it's just that, you know, I think we all love Netflix and films and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I've been taking the advantage of going back and watching all the films that I never had time to watch, and that's been great. But, you know, it doesn't offer the same sort of communal experience that theatre does. And I think that's what we're all craving at the moment. You know, we're all just wishing that we could be sat in a room experiencing things, whether that's a pub or whether, you know, and watching a football with a bunch of people, or whether that's in a theatre watching a story unfold with someone we don't know sat next to us, and just sort of hearing their reactions and laughing, you know, at the same time as other people. I just don't think that can be replaced, and I don't think anything. I'm not sure that any other form quite like theatre exists in that way, which is one of the reasons why I and everyone, I guess, who's involved in it and who likes to go and watch it loves it so much. So yeah, hopefully when it's safe to do so and we can get those sort of full audiences back in and get that life back into the theatres, you know, and I think that's what we're missing, really. I'm missing.
You know, obviously slightly unconventional route into theatre. I know it was you know, from the Kate that kind of encouraged you to go into it. But what do you think will be your trajectory from here? Whether or not you win this award, what will happen next?
Oh, who's that? It's not for me to say, is it? I don't know. You can only do what's in front of you, really. And I've been very lucky to be offered some great opportunities. Working on a couple of other plays. For one of them I can talk about, which is for a touring company called Payne's Plough and Theatre Royal Plymouth, which, fingers crossed, is going to sort of kick off in March next year. And that's it's an exciting opportunity to take a play around the country, which, as someone who didn't grow up in London, you know, I think is like a vital resource, like, and to make sure that regional theatres are getting like quality, you know, not to say that my plays are quality, but like, you know, but make sure there's a real good standard of work, like going out into regional theatres to encourage everyone around the country to get involved in it. And then I'm also working on a couple of like films, which is insane. Like, you know, it's been such a huge learning curve to be working on those over the course of lockdown, because it's like the first time I've been writing in that format, but have been very lucky to be welcomed into a team of very experienced and very sort of generous people who have really sort of helped me grow, I think, over the past year. I don't think there's really I don't think that there's really a substitute for just sort of like doing it and being, you know, and getting the opportunity to just write. And this is the first time that I've been writing full time ever in my life. So it just, you know, and I think that's been, you know, a big learning curve, but a very positive one. So we'll see, I suppose, yeah, hopefully carry on doing this, basically.
And have you got any final nuggets of advice for any young people that kind of want to get into theatre or film or the arts and they're not sure, you know, how could they follow you on the path you've taken?
How could they follow me? Well, I mean, I was very lucky to have, you know, a creative member of my family sort of let me be aware that it was something that you could do as a career. So like, you know, that I think was like a huge advantage to me, you know, to just know that there was someone that did that and it was a world that existed. So I think, you know, if you don't have that in your family, it can be very difficult to really, especially if you're from a working class sort of background like I am, and like I grew up around. If I hadn't have had that member of my family, it would have been really tricky. So I think just get involved, you know, if you can. I mean, I just hope that. I saw an interview with Michael Sheen where he was talking the other day, where he was talking about the sort of infrastructure that helped him realize his potential and his sort of creative talent was all sort of like publicly funded and through the council, and that's not there anymore, which is really sad. So I just hope that, you know, after the pandemic, that those sort of those youth groups and those things are still accessible. Really, that's not really a nugget of help, is it? That was quite pessimistic talking about Michael. Just get out there and just, you know, I didn't start writing until I was 24, mainly just through awkwardness and like imposter syndrome and like the sense that like my stories weren't valid, or that like no one would want to go and see a play about the boys in prison. And that just wasn't true, and that was all in my head, really. So I think like my main sort of bit of advice would just be that like if you've got something to say, like don't put it off. Like just get out there and go to your local theatre and ask if there's a drama club you can get involved in, or write a play and send it in. And don't be scared that people are gonna say no, because yeah, you never know.
All right, fantastic. Well, it was great to chat to you, and best of luck
thanks very much. Nice
and enjoy the ceremony.
Cheers. Yeah, it'll be weird, I think, after being in my flat for the best part of a year and a half. But yeah, thank you very much.
Enjoy it. All right, well, it's lovely to chat to you. Thanks so much, Samuel.
Take care, Sarah.
Bye.